behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and invite him to address the Assembly.
The UN General Assembly ends this week, but most world leaders have already given their speeches, including Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari. On Friday, the president addressed COVID-19 vaccine distribution, sit-tight leadership in Africa,
distinguished delegates,
and terrorism, among other issues. On the sidelines of the summit, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyema, was holding bilaterals with other foreign ministers. Joining me to discuss Nigeria's outing at the 76th UNGA in New York is foreign policy commentator Colin Sweke. Then the U.S. closes an impromptu border camp in Del Rio, Texas, having sieved through the thousands of built shelters there, hoping to get into the United States. The issue has been a sore thumb for the Biden administration. I speak to Ambassador Jean Pillard, Haiti's former ambassador to the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, and now founder Life Skills Haiti Foundation, about what Haitians want from the international community. That's Diplomatic Channel in Iraq. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Let's check in another discussions in diplomatic circles. We'll be right back. The Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyema, has called for deepening of ties between the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The foreign ministers of both countries met on the sidelines of the 76th UN General Assembly. Mr. Onyema reminded his Iranian counterparts that both countries have excellent relations and would want to see an improvement in other areas such as trade. Meanwhile, the Minister of Foreign Affairs also met with his Ivorian counterpart, Kadia Kamara, over reforms in the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. Mr. Onyema said the sub-regional organization is going through a process of reform, noting that Nigeria and Côte d'Ivoire are amongst the big countries of ECOWAS. He said his Ivorian counterparts conveyed his president's message to President Buhari to reiterate their support by Côte d'Ivoire to Nigeria and welcome the strong relations and cooperation between the two. Finally, the second China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo has begun in Changsha, the capital city of Hunan province, attracting more than 40 African countries and nearly 900 Chinese and African enterprises. This year's theme is New Starts, New Opportunities and New Accomplishments. The expo contains a slew of online and offline activities, and cloud platforms can be found everywhere, showing real-time trade data and featured products online. Online conferences, transactions, and exhibitions have created a more extensive and convenient platform for cooperation. The expo is an important part of the 8 major initiatives for China-Africa cooperation announced by Chinese President Xi Jinping at the 2018 Beijing Summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Welcome back. President Muhammadu Buhari addressed the UN General Assembly on Friday, September 24th. He addressed the COVID-19 pandemic and vaccines, terrorism, racial equality, and presidents changing constitutions in order to stay longer in office.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and invite him to address the Assembly.
President Muhammadu Buhari's address at the United Nations General Assembly came as more than half of leaders of the 196 member body chose to give their addresses virtually.
Mr. Secretary General,
reading from his notes at the podium, the president called on leaders to ensure the vaccines get to those who really need it, especially in developing countries.
Nigeria remains grateful for the assistance received from our partners and friends all over the world. Vaccination is the key to our safe emergence from the pandemic. We fully support the COVAX initiative, from which we have benefited. We also thank the United States of America, Turkey, India, China, European Union, and others for the vaccines provided. Despite the acknowledgement, however, I would like to reiterate my call for a fairer and more equitable distribution of vaccines in all countries so that together we can fight and contain the pandemic. The rising wave of newer and more contagious strains makes this even more urgent.
While not mentioning names, he called on leaders to respect constitutional term limits, the result of which will lead to fewer conflict. West Africa has also seen at least 2 coups within a year, and ECOWAS is still trying to restore democracy in Mali and now Guinea.
In West Africa especially, our democratic gains of the past decades are now being eroded. The recent trend of unconstitutional takeover of power, sometimes in reaction to unilateral changes of constitution by some leaders, must not be tolerated by the international community. Nigeria fully supports the efforts of ECOWAS to address this growing challenge and appreciates the support of both the African Union and the United Nations. In this regard, I would like to reiterate that as leaders of our individual member states, we need to adhere to constitutional provisions of our countries, particularly on term limits. This is one area that generates crisis and political tension in our sub-region.
He wants the international community to do more to curb the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, which impact is felt globally, and then drew attention to non-state actors like the Boko Haram, who continue to prey on soft targets in Nigeria's north.
Terrorism continues to dominate security discourse worldwide. In Nigeria, Boko Haram, terrorist group, though fragmented by internal strife and weakened by our defense forces, is still active and preying on soft targets. Nigeria will continue to work closely with United Nations counter-terrorism bodies and entities with a view to bringing this scourge to an end. Nigeria has spared no effort in addressing the challenges of terrorism posed by the activities of Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria, the Lake Chad region, as well as banditry in the northwest and north central. Nigeria remains deeply concerned over the illicit trade, transfer, and circulation of small arms and light weapons. Their excessive accumulation and uncontrolled spread in many regions of the world are having devastating humanitarian and socio-economic consequences, especially on the continent of Africa. It is on this note that my delegation calls for the worldwide application of the Arms Trade Treaty to codify accountability in conventional arms trade, which is critical to the security of nations.
President Buhari also touched on other topics such as Africa's huge debt burden, rising food insecurity, safeguarding of fundamental rights, and reform of the UN Security Council, calling once again for the addition of an African nation to reflect a more relevant Security Council. On the sidelines of the summit, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyema, held bilateral talks with foreign ministers of Venezuela, Iran, Côte d'Ivoire, and with the UN's Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. Before his speech on Friday, President Buhari held a closed-door meeting with Her Majesty Maxima Zorreguieta, Queen of the Netherlands.
Joining me now to discuss the President's address and outing at this year's UN General Assembly is foreign policy commentator Collins Weke. He joins me from Brussels. Collins, it's great to see you. Firstly, I know you must have watched some of the speeches at the UNGA this year. A theme for this year's meeting, building resilience through hope, to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainability, respond to the needs of the planet, respect of people, and revitalize the United Nations. What did you think of it and its meaning for countries such as Nigeria?
Well, it's quite a mouthful, isn't it? But of course, pretty relevant for the time, considering that we are in post-COVID-19 era. Now, for Nigeria, what that essentially means is that it shines the torchlight on the poverty level in the country, which is at a very, very alarming rate prior to COVID-19. As a matter of fact, in some parts of the world, Nigeria had been referred to as the poverty capital of the world. And then came COVID-19 that actually worsened the situation. Now, the prediction was that Nigeria will be in such a bad situation that people will be dropping dead in the streets as a consequence of, COVID-19. But if people were dropping dead in Nigeria, it wasn't for COVID-19, it was out of hunger. And unfortunately, the government has not been able to, manage that very well. As a matter of fact, yes, there were some support for families that are suffering the hardest hit, but there are evidence also that they didn't, that the help didn't quite get to the target group. Now, one would have expected that the United Nations choosing rebuilding recovery as a cardinal point of the General Assembly of 2021, that Nigeria would do two things. One, highlight what they have done to make life easier for the hardest suffering, or if they didn't do quite much, actually iron out the plans that Nigeria have to be able to accommodate the sufferings and bring relief to the people, because that was actually what the United Nations had in mind when they chose that as part of their overall team. But of course, Mr. President went for other aspects of his work, which I believe in the course of this program we'll be talking about. But they didn't actually touch on that specific aspect.
After his speech on Friday, he met with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who urged him to provide stability in West Africa. So how would you describe Nigeria's leadership in the sub-region in light of events such as the coups in Mali and in Guinea and the crisis between Cameroon's English-speaking parts and the government?
The thrust of Nigeria foreign policy is concentratism, which means that Nigeria wants to be a regional leader in the sub-Sahara Africa, but also Africa as a whole. And that has been, since Nigeria became a nation state, that had been the foreign policy concentration, and so far they have continued to live up to expectation, although that policy plank of Nigeria is under enormous stress, because people are beginning now to question the sense of having to reach out to help out other neighboring countries when your own citizens themselves are suffering. Now, I mean, that's not quite the best way to look at it, because of course, what happens to your neighbor has a way of affecting you. So as far as Nigeria's leadership in Africa is concerned, I believe Nigeria has been doing reasonably well. They have not failed to condemn the coup in both Mali and Guinea. And they are also in the forefront in leading some sort of isolationist policy towards the latest, which is Guinea. They have condemned it, and they are part of suspending them. So all those are good. But I think if Nigeria leading in the process of acting more preemptively, I think that would be best for everyone, because people have asked the question, Why are they all suddenly speaking out now when, Alpha Conde was actually, amending the constitution to enable him fraudulently be a beneficiary of the amendment that he made? Nigeria, taking the lead, could have spoken out more seriously to prevent it, and by preventing it from happening, perhaps the military juntas wouldn't have had any reason to seize power with a barrel of the gun. So Nigeria should begin to think of acting more preemptively than beginning to speak out when the mess has already been made.
Collins Nweke, thank you so much for analyzing the UNGA and Nigeria's presence there this past week. Thank you again for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The U.S. Special Envoy for Haiti resigned last week following the inhumane treatment meted out on citizens at the U.S.-Mexican border. At least 13,000 Haitian migrants have been living in makeshift camps under a bridge near the border, which is now being cleared out. The U.S. started deportation flights last weekend from a border town. Local officials struggled to provide them with food and adequate sanitation. In the meantime, horrific images of U.S. officers on horseback whipping migrants trying to get back, having crossed into Mexico to buy food and supplies, have drawn great criticism. Joining me now is Ambassador Jean Pillard, Haiti's former ambassador to the UK and Northern Ireland, who is now founder of Life Skills Haiti, a non-profit organization that focuses on vocational education in Haiti's countryside with a mission to providing the necessary resources to allowing underprivileged Haitian youths with education and technical skills to find employment. Ambassador Pillard joins me from Westwood, Massachusetts. Ambassador Pillard, thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you, Amarachi, for having me, and I thank your viewers for allowing me into their home.
It is a pleasure. Let's begin with a couple of obvious questions. Why are people leaving Haiti, and why are they coming to the United States?
Amarachi, if you look at world history, throughout history, migration always existed. People would leave their homeland looking for jobs, looking for a better life. Back in 2010, so you can understand the context by which Haitians are migrating right now. In 2010, we had a 7.0 magnitude earthquake that nearly destroyed the capital. We lost over 200,000 people. 1.3 million people were displaced. That event in itself started fueling the migration of Haitians toward the Southern Hemisphere. Initially, a lot of Haitians started going towards Chile, towards Brazil, where they were promised jobs. They started working there, and slowly the jobs started drying out. They started experiencing discrimination. Then they decided that to make the journey upward, hoping to reach Mexico, where their intent was to try and find a better life there. Rumors about the Mexican border being open to allow Haitian into the United States and misunderstanding about how the US was extending the temporary protected status for Haitians living in the United States precipitated what you saw the other day, what we have been all seeing on TV lately. So that is the basis, the history for why you are seeing so many Haitians migrating right now.
And Haiti, as an island nation, has gone through a lot. You just mentioned the 7.0 magnitude earthquake back in 2010. It actually went through another one on September 20, the 4.2, beg your pardon, magnitude earthquake on the 20th of September. There's also been a political crisis. First of all, about whether the late president had a right to continue another year in office when his own term had expired, and then he was also assassinated in office. When you're thinking about all of these problems about Haiti, what comes to mind? You know, you being sometimes on the outside, having to look through the eyes of, you know, the international community back into Haiti. What are you seeing?
Well, lately, about 2 weeks ago, I came back from Haiti. I had an opportunity and a privilege to visit the ravaged South, where you are seeing women and children sleeping, standing up on their tops because their home have been destroyed and they don't have the means to rebuild yet. When I look all that's been happening with Haiti lately, I am thinking Haiti cannot continue to be the way it is right now. Haiti cannot continue to be depending upon foreign aid. Aid is not the way forward for Haiti. Our friends in the international community need to start looking at us through a different set of lenses. We, Haitians, need to start changing the narrative. And at the same time, it is important that Haiti start reassessing its relationship with its friends, its relationship with its partners, in a way that will be adjusted, that will benefit Haiti moving forward. When I look at all this thing, this is what I'm thinking. This cannot continue the way it has been going for ages.
Are you saying, you know, because Haiti does have friends around the world, everyone is concerned about what's happening in your country. I think the U.S. is interested, but you know, when you're looking at those pictures of hundreds under that bridge in Texas, which is now being cleared out, and then the inhumanity, you know, of the officers on horseback trying to drive people back into Mexico, you really do wonder, you know, whether people should be coming to Haiti in that manner. But then again, you're talking about revising relations with foreign partners. But these are the same foreign partners who've come to Haiti's aid at the time of trouble. Look at the earthquake in 2010. It was mainly international interventions that helped Haiti get through that, including, you know, what's currently going on now. So what sort of help would Haiti need at this moment?
Well, at this moment, when you look at how a country moves forward, how a country evolves, it's never with aid. We would much rather those partners look at us as equal partners, as they so often call us, and have a more balanced relationship where it's not so much in giving Haiti aid every now and then, giving Haiti a lifeline so Haitians can be right above the water so you don't drown, but you will never get out of that water. This is the relationship that I'm saying that we should be revisiting. The status quo is not sustainable. I don't know any country who came out of the darkness with foreign aid. And so far, it appears as if all Haiti is good for is hand them aid that is not really sustainable. Because right now, it is time for Haitians. It is time for every single Haitian and every people who look like Haitian to start thinking, what are we doing? What are we doing? Where did it go all wrong? How do we stop? How do we pause? How do we reassess? And how do we readjust? Because we speak of partners and friends. Haiti has been independent for 217 years. It does not take 217 years for a country to move forward. We've seen evidence of countries who went to war, who were destroyed overnight. And within a few years, those countries They were rebuilt and they are thriving. The question is there a true willingness from some of our partners to see a prosperous Haiti? That should be the question.
Ambassador Jean Pillard, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for discussing with me on Diplomatic Channel.
Pleasure to be here with you.
That's Diplomatic Channel this week. Tell us what you think. You can send your comments or your questions to @Amarachi Ubani on Instagram. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you again next time.